Essex Porter, welcome. Good to have you with us, and congratulations on your retirement after 39 years. Wow.
Thank you very much. 39 years at KIRO 7. I can't say it was the plan, but it worked out.
When you say it wasn't a plan, what do you mean?
Well, I'm not a Seattle native, and there were other jobs that I was interested in that would have taken me from Seattle. I didn't get those jobs, so I just continued working hard at KIRO 7 and adopted Seattle as my home.
So let's talk about your life and times here. Where'd you grow up, and where'd you get the interest about being a reporter?
I'm a military kid. I'm a native of Chicago, but I did not grow up there. I grew up in Okinawa, Japan. We had a couple of tours there. We had a couple of tours at Fort Riley. Also grew up in Junction City, the town next door. I was fortunate to get to Hawaii for my senior year in high school. So I'm a graduate of Radford High School in Hawaii. And I attended the University of Nebraska because it has a really good journalism school, now a college of journalism these many years later.
Wow. Were you interested in being a reporter from the time that you were a young guy?
No, I won't say I was interested from the time that I was a young person. I was really more interested in being a scientist, a chemist, or something like that. But I will say that as I look back on it, a seed was planted when President Kennedy was assassinated in November of 1963. And we were living in Kansas at the time. In our town, there wasn't a television station, and there wasn't cable television either. So we had over-the-air television from the capital of Kansas, Topeka, 60 miles away. It was a CBS affiliate. We were riveted to the CBS coverage of the assassination, to Walter Cronkite and the rest of the coverage. And what happened that day, it was Friday. I'd gone home for lunch. I was in second grade. My mom was working, so it was just me. I had the lunch that she'd set up. I was leaving the house to get back to school on time. I saw the CBS News bulletin slide come up on the TV, but I left the house. I didn't realize that President Kennedy had been assassinated until I got back to my elementary school. And then it was a whirlwind of coverage of the assassination, and then ultimately the funeral a few days later. And just seeing that, I think, imprinted on me the importance of news, the importance that it has to everyone, that it was really interesting, really fascinating. And I didn't really think at that moment I wanted to be a reporter. But looking back on it really decades later, I think maybe that planted the seed, because that meant, the Porter family always watched the news after that. I always watched the news. So I grew up watching Walter Cronkite and a lot of other news. And so I think that just planted the seed.
Yeah. I remember as a kid, same thing, watching that with my parents, and my parents crying. And it seemed like the country sort of stood still for that time. But I also remember we used to have this big console radio. My father, who always got awful early, he was a farmer, and would round us up to catch the school bus. But we'd listen to the CBS World News Roundup in the morning.
Yes,
with Dallas Townsend, and that was a big imprint on me about having an interest in the whole business and things like that.
Yeah.
Did you ever think, okay, as an African American, that it would be difficult to become a reporter?
No, I was I was typically naive about whether it would be difficult to become a reporter as an African American. And not really till I got to college that I realized that, that might have some bearing on it. Um, but in the 70s, there were already groundbreaking role models. I especially remember Ed Bradley, who later became a 60 Minutes correspondent, but
Yeah.
distinguished himself covering the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in college, I got a scholarship for a CBS reporter who tragically died too young, Michelle Clark.
Right.
Um, I saw her on the CBS Evening News. I remember seeing one of Connie Chung's very first stories on the CBS Evening News. So, I ultimately, did realize that these were people, groundbreaking people. And it may not be as easy for a young Black person to become a reporter, but I never felt that that would stop.
So how did you end up in Seattle?
Uh, I graduated from the University of Nebraska. I was very, very fortunate to get a job reporting in Omaha out of college. Thank you, wonderful University of Nebraska professors, for that. And when I was working in Nebraska, one of the photographers who came to my station was a native of the Spokane area from a farm family who had worked a lot with colleagues in Eugene. Well, a number of the colleagues went to Channel 2 KATU in Portland, and they asked this photographer to come back and work there. The two of us one weekend did a story about an airplane landing on Interstate 80 near Council Bluffs. And while the pilot didn't talk to us, we got as much of the rest of the story as we could. My now dear friend, the photographer, got great pictures, and I narrated that story, and we had it on the evening news. And when they invited my photographer friend to return to Portland, they saw that story, and they said, "See if that guy will come too." So that's how I was invited to apply for a job at KTU in Portland, which I got. So that's how I got to the Northwest.
Mm-hmm.
I spent let's see, what would have been 3 years there. And I saw an ad in Broadcasting Magazine for a job in Seattle. And remember, say this is what dates me, because you used to actually have to wait for a magazine to come out every week to check the job listings.
Exactly.
And I applied for the job here at KIRO TV, and they said, "Come on up." So that's how I got to Seattle.
Wow. Wow. So what was the state of news like when you came to Seattle? I mean, I think all of us, we're similar ages, kind of have lived through peak local television. It's just not like it was. But so what was Cairo like when you got here?
Well, a couple of things. This idea that somehow television was better when we were younger, we need to put that in context. There were some things that were better, but those things fit into that time. The question is, are the stations doing news that fits well into this time, now the 21st century?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I like to put some limits on my nostalgia. I don't say it was so much better back then.
Yeah, but just the amount of resources that you had at hand at TV stations then, because of the revenue they were generating. Because right now the ratings are nothing like they were years ago. I mean, even 10 years ago, the ratings are dramatically different.
It's true, the ratings are dramatically different. I don't necessarily know for a fact that the revenues are dramatically different, because that audience is still valuable, because you can assemble an audience in a way that you can't usually assemble an audience for online, whether it's the online ads like Facebook or whatever, or whether it's some streaming service. So I don't know their revenues. I'm not necessarily so sure. In that the revenues are incredibly dramatically different, but they might be. In terms of resources, doing some of the news, of course, required more people to do some of the very same things we're doing now, simply because of the technological changes and some of the automation. But if a station still wants to do daily news, if they want to do special news programs, they can find the resources to do that. It just depends on what they want to do.
Whether they want to do it.
One of the things that's different, I'll tell you, one of the things that's different is there's a lot more actual time on the air. So, when I got here, I'm pretty sure, and again, you're trusting now 39-year-old memories, but I'm pretty sure, there wasn't news at 4 or news at 3 in the afternoon. There wasn't news at 9 in the evening. I was hired at Channel 7 because they were going to do a half-hour newscast at 7 in the evening, which I was hired to beef up the staff for. So there's certainly more time on the air. Not all of that time is filled with locally generated hard news. And there may be things that stations did routinely that aren't done now. Channel 4 and Channel 2 in Portland both had a tradition of weekly town hall meetings. Both Channel 2 and the big sister Channel 4, every Sunday had a town hall where people came in the audience and issues were discussed and people discussed them. We don't have that particular kind of programming anymore.
The public affairs connected type of programming, it's gone for the most part, and everything is really, I think, focused with the local news programs, of which there is a lot of. And I think you're talking about how things were way back when. I don't know that they were any better, but they were surely different, mainly because of the time of, because the business is just always evolving so much. So it's definitely changed in that respect, because now we have more local news. And now, before you left, did you have to shoot any of your stories on your own, or were you still working with a photographer and all of that? Because that's changed too.
Yeah, that has changed some. I personally was not shooting my stories because they wanted my stories to actually get on television, so they definitely didn't have me shoot them. No, I was fortunate enough to work with photographers, and theoretically, we have what are called multimedia journalists, people at our station who can shoot, write and report and edit their own stories. It has, as a practical matter for us at KIRO 7, not been used that much, simply because of the technological challenges. And it's difficult if you're writing and shooting your own story to also present the story live on television, which at KIRO 7 is one of the important ways to present stories. So should they get more, much more staff, much more equipment, they may implement more multimedia journalists, but we will have to see.
Over the years that you've covered Seattle, I mean, you're one of the people that have really chronicled Seattle. What was the one story that you covered in all these years that really changed you? I mean, that was so dramatic that it changed the way you thought about things?
Boy, that is tough, because I'm not I'm not thinking that, there was some story that struck like lightning and sort of turned my view around. I think, for all of us, the policing and police accountability stories have changed us, maybe more in a gradual way, but in a definitive way. Um, I think the advent of citizen video, police body cameras, um, has shown us that there's often more to the story than we used to get in the statements from police. So, to that degree, it has made us, question more. But is that a real dramatic change? I think it's more of an incremental change, based on the events and the technology that shapes them. Um, a story that opened my mind to more possibilities was the story of the former mayor Ed Murray, who ended up resigning over sexual abuse allegations. I would not have thought that was such allegations would, and such very credible allegations would have been possible for any of the politicians that I'd covered. And so, I thought that was sort of a low possibility. Some of the sexual harassment Me Too stories I, didn't have at top of mind. But, now that has opened my mind to those possibilities. I would say, I'm less likely. I'm still likely to be shocked by such stories, but far less likely to be surprised.
As you covered the racial reckoning after George Floyd and all the protests that happened here, how did you separate yourself as an African American and as a reporter and covering a story where we were seeing this dramatic change and upheaval and people calling for justice and social justice? Did it affect you? How, and if it did, how so?
Well, if there was an effect on me, I think for me, the effect was to see so many people of so many different races pushing for racial justice did make me more hopeful. As opposed to more cynical about the fact that maybe these hopes will be disappointed. The fact that so many people could care made me more hopeful. But you mentioned separating myself. It's not, so much a separation. What I'm trying to do is to cover news with both integrity and compassion. And I once was in a small seminar with a former Time magazine editor, Jack White, also an African American, and he was asked whether he ever somehow shaded the coverage of Black leaders and racial issues. And he responded by saying that Black people had been lied to, deceived so much over the decades that he refused to be a part of that, of any further deceptions, whether it turned out to be good for somebody in the Black community or bad for somebody in the Black community. So I tried to keep that as a touchstone. There's no point. It's no help to deceive people you're trying to serve. So I can't say I had some big problem separating myself because, I'm still trying to approach the stories with integrity.
So, so this last political cycle, right? Bruce Harrell's elected mayor. Um, you know, clearly the electorate in Seattle has kind of said, no, we want a more centrist view of what's going on. What's your take of what happened this past election? I mean, because most of us, of a certain age, they get their news from the media, social media, that sort of thing. You were on the streets, you were talking to everybody. What really went down this election? What's going on in this city? Where do you think we're headed?
I'll share some impressions. I hate to share them in such a way that I know what it was, but
You know
but
better than a lot of people, that's for sure.
but I'll definitely share some impressions. Um, One impression is, and even the supporters of Lorena Gonzalez admit this, Bruce Harrell is simply a really charismatic guy. My impression too is that he was very much to Seattle what Joe Biden was to the nation. After a turbulent time, people wanted somebody who could be more of a healer, more of a uniter, more of someone who they felt could bring people together and who could turn down what people felt was chaos. Now, objectively, in Seattle, we still have it pretty good, and there's not the sort of true chaos as there is in other parts of the country. But people here, clearly don't like some of what they are seeing and some of what they are living. Clearly don't like to see all the homeless encampments. And when I talk to some of the very people who don't like homeless encampments, they also emphasize to me that they don't like the fact that people are homeless in the first place. It's not just the encampments they want to get rid of. But I just think that Bruce Harrell was perceived and campaigned on as the person who could help to heal some of the problems. And when I spoke with people, I spoke with people about him in the international district, and and one of the things that I'm a little unhappy to have to admit is I didn't quite realize how well known and respected and loved Bruce Harrell is in the Asian community. I should have guessed that. I mean, he's certainly, he has both Asian and African American heritage. But when I went to talk with people in the international district about it, they were truly enthusiastic about it.
Oh yeah, they are.
And and they described problems that they were having with petty crime and some of the violence. So the first set of window breaking and destruction actually happened in the international district.
Oh, I'm very aware of that.
Before it went downtown on Capitol Hill. Mm-hmm. So and that's a story that got undercovered. But no, I think what happened in the election is people felt there was a greater chance to return to more of a normal civic life if Bruce Harrell were mayor. As reporters, we try to look beneath that as well, because Bruce Harrell was on the council when a lot of the problems started, right? So how can he fix them now as mayor? Why should you believe he could fix them as mayor? But of course, Lorena Gonzalez and Bruce Harrell were on the council together when some of these problems started. Yeah. So it was difficult for Lorena Gonzalez to necessarily say there was an advantage to selecting her.
You covered politics, and I think you had the moniker of being political reporter for KIRO. Why did you want to cover politics? What was it that drew you to that? Or was it the assignment you got? Or was it something that you wanted to do?
Oh no, it's something I very much wanted to do because, it is a thing that affects all of our lives all of the time. There will be those of us who suffer tragedies, and those of us who suffer horrible tragedies, and some of them but some of those tragedies come down to what our elected leaders do, what we ask them to do, whether they follow through with it, whether we are divided in what we are asking them to do. And so I just think that politics affects all of our lives, truly shapes our lives, shapes our city, our state, our country. And so that's one reason I want to cover it. The other reason is, as a reporter, I just want to be there for the first draft of history. I just want to be there when history is made. That's what I want to witness. And a lot of that history is made in politics. Whether it's the historic election of the first African-American president, whether it's being at the Republican convention, which I was fortunate to be at when Donald Trump was nominated.
Oh my God.
Your response reminded us that our history doesn't necessarily go in one direction, does it?
No, it doesn't.
But I just want to be there for the first draft of it,
Yeah.
to be that eyewitness to history, and that's what I've loved. So it's covering something that is important to our individual daily lives, and then for me personally, that first draft of history.
When you came into the newsroom at KIRO, what had to be 80, 82, somewhere in there?
September 7th, 1982.
Right. How many other African Americans were there? How many other people of color were in the staff?
That was a long time ago, so I don't really remember precisely what the answer to that question is. I do remember that when I came in, there was another African American reporter, and he left after probably another 18 months. He wanted to move up and moved on to Houston. I don't think Mickey Flowers was in the newsroom when I got there, but she had been there before, and within a year or so after I got there, she decided to come back. So I got the pleasure and honor of working with Mickey Flowers. We had an African American news anchor come to the station, Narissa Williams. I worked with Narissa.
I remember her.
I'm trying to think who else. Ultimately, in '91, Deborah Horn came. Deborah Horn is fabulous, and
she surely is.
It's been an honor to work with her.
Yeah, she's a great.
I tease her about it, but she really is the queen.
Yeah, she is. I just got to say that both you and Deborah, to me as reporters, you guys were just solid and a lot of class and could cover just about anything. And you probably did, besides politics and things like that. But I think that both of you were just so solid in doing so. Did you ever talk to management about the need for more diversity in the newsroom?
Yes. Sometimes it would be a short reminder. Occasionally it would be a little bit more, and a reminder not only of on-air diversity, but diversity in leadership.
Right.
That's key.
Yeah. Because reporters have a role in what stories are covered, but our editors and bosses have a role above us about what's covered. So we need situations seen from different perspectives. So over the arc of our coverage, different perspectives aren't left out. We may not be able to cover every perspective every day or the first day on a story, but we need to get to more of the perspectives as that issue is covered.
Was that a challenge to have that happen within the newsroom?
Not a challenge to have the idea accepted, more of a challenge to have it implemented more consistently. And especially when it came to leadership, probably more of a challenge. As I leave KIRO 7, I'm pleased to say that I finally did get to work for an African American executive producer. And those are people who are on the front lines shaping the way things are seen on television. They shape the stories we cover along with other managers, and then they work with the producers to shape and frame the coverage. So that's a really important spot. So I think, yes, management does listen. Management does act. There's just always a question of consistency. So, that's why, we have to, as I'm a reporter, so I will, if I see a different perspective that hasn't come up in the meeting, I'll try to put that in the meeting and see, if we can cover that. And if we're not covering it today, we can cover it the next day. But yeah, there are times when I've done some speaking up. My own personality tends to be, more quiet and diplomatic. Only on rare occasion, like the time a long time ago, not with any of the current managers in the current newsroom, but a very long time ago, I did rather curtly shut down the idea of interviewing Mark Furman from the OJ case about some crime that was here, because I didn't really think we needed that particular perspective in the newscast.
How'd that go over?
It went over very quickly. We did not interview him.
Okay.
Way to go, Essex.
So are you going to miss covering politics? I mean, I think politics is fascinating. I'm especially heartened by kind of the young politicians of color that are up and coming. I think they bring a great perspective. But are you going to miss covering politics and being part of the action that way?
I'm going to miss being part of the action, being like, this is happening. We should get there. I've felt that. I've only been retired like a week and a half, and I've already felt that a dozen times.
You'll get over it. So what made you decide that now was time to retire?
Well, and let me be clear. There's nothing I'm upset about or mad about or leaving, with some sort of any kind of bad feelings. And I will say I was pleased and touched that bosses did ask me, if I was sure I wanted to retire, I could stay if I would like to. They were very great about that. But I've been a full-time television reporter since 1978.
Wow.
And I did have a great break for a fellowship at the University of Chicago in the mid 80s. But I just thought it's difficult to see what other possibilities there might be when, at least for me, when I was, 1,000% focused on doing a good job every day. And, I'm not sure what else may be out there for me. And there may not be anything grand else out there for me, but after so long doing the very same thing, I just kept reminding myself of, Congresswoman Maxine Waters reclaiming her time. And, when you're doing daily journalism, your time belongs to the newsroom, really. I mean, even when you're not necessarily working, you're always thinking about something. You're always making sure that we don't miss something. Um, and I just felt like after a long career, and remember, we don't know what's in the future for us. We don't know how long we'll be healthy. We don't know how long we'll have choices. So I thought it was a good time to retire. I'd actually had chosen a contract that expired at the end of 2020, so I could cover the 2020 election. But then we were in the middle of a pandemic, and I had to put humility aside a little bit and think, there probably aren't as many people left in the town that have had connections through a couple of generations. And people might like to see a familiar face with some of these stories. At the time, I was doing a lot of Olympia coverage and a lot of coverage of the governor. And plus, who wants to miss a big story? I like to
oh, yeah, this is a big story. There's no doubt about that.
Like I say, I like to be there for historical events. And so I asked if I might stay another year, and they said that would be fine.
So had you reached, I'm sure you had, the point where you were one of the reporters in the newsroom where young people that came in from another market say, go to Essex, he could tell you where such and such is, or he can give you a good connection on reaching so-and-so in whatever branch of government.
Yes, but I was proud to be that reporter. And sometimes I would reach out to them. I'd see that they got an assignment. I thought, I've got a little insight here. Maybe I can save them a couple of minutes on a phone call. And, because, you don't really have that much time to put these stories together.
No, you don't.
So, I would offer help. But years ago, even before I thought about retiring, years ago, this wonderful reporter, she's now gone home to Dallas. She's doing a great job. Her name is Maria Guerrero, and she had come to our station, and I was on the opposite side of the newsroom from her, and had not really run into her for weeks, and finally got to say hello to her, and I was struck because she called me Mr. Porter, and I think, well, of course, Maria, you don't have to call me Mr. Porter. And she was just wonderful about it. But later I got to thinking, you don't always see yourself the way other people see you. You might see yourself as this young reporter desperately trying to get today's story on. Someone else may see you differently.
I know I was joking with you when I called to ask you to do the podcast. And I said, you had the best name for a reporter. Yeah, and actually, no joke. I still think you have the best name for a reporter.
Well, obviously, because Wolf Blitzer was taken.
I thank my father for sharing his name.
Yeah. Oh, cool. That's very cool. So, are you going to spend some time just kind of doing nothing, or are you thinking that you still want to do a little bit here and there? Be a semi-retired, kind of like Matt and I are?
Well, the next few months, are definitely going to be more of a family focus, and working on that. My father died just a few days before I retired. He knew I was going to retire, and was very proud of it. So there's affairs to take care of there, and then my daughter's about to graduate from college in the spring. We sort of have to decide about what sort of downsizing, if any, we want to do. So and yes, you can do all that and you can still work. But I think it's great to have some time to focus on family issues. Let my thinking clear from my day-to-day broadcast work, because I'm still thinking on weekends. If you don't finish this errand, you'll never get to it the week. Yeah. Oh no! Now actually, you'll have time to do things during the week if you would like.
Well, there'll come a time, Essex, when that any of us in the media realizes how relentless the business is.
Right.
And to be free of that fact alone is liberating, because it is relentless.
Yeah.
It is.
Especially.
It is relentless, and but I don't say that in a complaining way.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I once attended an awards luncheon with Sam Donaldson, the former White House correspondent for ABC, was a featured speaker. It was actually my RTNDA Scholarship Awards luncheon. Somebody was asking him about the burden of being recognized, and he said, sometimes maybe, but the thing to always remember is we're volunteers. We volunteered for the business. So yes, it can be relentless, but we volunteered for that. So don't complain about it. But if you want to change it, if you have the opportunity to change it, then you can decide whether you want to be in such a relentless business. And fortunately, I have the opportunity to retire, and so as Maxine Waters says, I'm reclaiming my time. In the future, some many months from now, some of that time might be spent in some form of journalism as well, but not just yet.
So I'll tell you what, when we need a voice to give us some perspective on some political issues and other things, we're going to call you up and say, Essex, join us to weigh in on things. And you're going to do it, like it or not, because we're asking you to, all right?
Well, the knowledge is perishable, and soon I won't have that much perspective anyway.
Oh, you might have. Who knows? No, listen, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk about your long career, and thank you for all the work that you did. And
thank you.
Really, you're hell of a reporter, man. 39 years, that says a lot. And so Debbie may be the queen, but I think you're the king on the other side of that. So thank you so much.
Countless generations of people who've looked at you on the screen and said, hey, there's someone that looks like me. I think is a great thing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. And Enrique, you should know how much I've always admired the work you've done and the trails that you have blazed.
Thanks.
And it's that has also been very, very important here. So thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Essex. And listen, enjoy retirement, because it's a time to really just enjoy yourself. It's fun, actually.
You can do stuff like this.
There you go. Yeah. Essex Porter, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.